Is that a trick question? This man was a bona fide scrub. Bona fide scrub.
This dude, I believe he's a bona fide superstar right now.
Right, oh, well, of course, it's all about winning, baby.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the Star and Scrub NBA podcast, joined by Lee as always. No earthquakes so far this week, mate, but how was your grand final on Saturday night? A bit of a buzzkill in the end, I guess, with the result. It looked like it was going to be a fantastic game up until, well, a minute to go before three-quarter time, and then, I don't know, I've never really seen anything like it. The D's just kicking away. It was 100-7 in about a quarter and a half. Of, as I said, never seen anything like it. How was your grand final night experience?
Probably one of the most sober grand finals I've had in a little while as well. But a close mate of mine, Will Fisher, is a big fan of the Melbourne D's, so I was very happy for him. And just makes me think maybe one day as a Bombers man, I'll eventually get to that point in my life. But I'm not holding my breath. How you feeling though, mate? You all good? No earthquakes, nothing recorded in Tassie?
Nah, not at all, mate. You guys as a Bombers fan should just probably worry about winning a final first before you talk about grand finals. So I know you've won the equal most in history, but it's been a while. So not that I can talk as a Pie supporter. We've won 3 in like 70 years. But anyway, let's get on to the NBA. We will discuss the Central Division. Those teams are the Chicago Bulls, Cleveland Cavaliers, Detroit Pistons, Indiana Pacers, and Milwaukee Bucks. And we've got a couple of guys coming on to discuss a couple of those teams. But before we do, just a few of the hot topics going around the NBA at the moment, because we have got, Media Day was yesterday, and we're basically hitting the start of the NBA season with Media Day yesterday for most teams, and now into training camp. Just a couple of things. So first of all, it was revealed yesterday, Zion Williamson has had surgery on his foot to repair a broken metatarsal. A bit more serious than mine that I did in year 7. Playing wall soccer, if anyone remembers playing that as a kid, maybe in Australia. So that was a good effort by me. Didn't have to have surgery on that. So Zion sounds a bit more serious. They think he might be back in time for the regular season. But how much of this is a setback for Zion, do you think?
Completely out of the blue, but you and I have discussed it numerous lengths. Just the physical freak he is, to be that size, but also that athletic, and just the pressure, I guess, his knees and feet would take. So I won't be surprised, until he gets to like a point in his life where he can stay at a certain weight and a certain size and know what's good for him and what's not good for him. Yeah, I wasn't really surprised that he got an injury, because I was actually listening to the interview, and he said it actually was from essentially overtraining. He was trying to train too hard and too long over the summer break. So, but he's got to be back for the regular season, you said?
Well, it sounds like it, but what kind of conditioning is he going to be in with that kind of injury where you've got to be off your feet kind of thing? I was listening to a podcast earlier today where they referred to him as looking chunky, was the word they used, at Media Day yesterday. So we'll just wait and see what kind of conditioning he's like. But it's a bit of a hard balance, because he needs that power and that strength and that size. That's what makes him so good, combined with that athleticism. But at the same time, he's also, early in his career, coming into his 3rd season. He's got to try and preserve his body, and he's already had quite some injuries. Another talking point was the contract extension of Michael Porter Jr., 5 years, $207 million. Now, we better preface this by saying that a lot of that money is incentive-based, and he has to make all NBA teams and all-star games and that kind of thing to guarantee all that money. But when you first saw it, Lee, what was your instant reaction?
I had to read that. In fact, there was incentives added to it, $207 million. Because when you look at the players that have had those $200 million contracts, they're all champions, MVPs, and then you just see Michael Porter Jr.'s name at the bottom. But I think you're going to use that cap space anyway. I reckon, as a team, as a franchise, like you've got to use it on someone else. So if you can. We're going to spend it, may as well be on Michael Porter Jr. And honestly, mate, I reckon you can go for a championship, because I think there'll be a time where the Denver Nuggets are actually championship favourites. I think once the Lakers and Nets are done, I reckon the age they're at, the way they mesh together, the way that Michael Porter Jr. was looking once Jamal Murray went down, I reckon it's a fantastic position to be in as a franchise. Would you sign that if you were the Denver Nuggets GM?
Yeah, I think so. You're not a massive free agent destination, and look, you're paying it on potential. As you said before, a lot of those guys that sign those contracts are the bona fide superstars, to quote Stephen A. Smith, I guess. They are the best players in the league. MPJ isn't at that point, so you're paying on potential, and it's a lot of money to pay on potential, and also a guy that has been injury prone in the past. We know that he's slid down draft boards during his draft year because of that back injury. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one, but yeah, I think they had to do it. And we'll just wait and see how he develops this season. Obviously, with Jamal Murray out, I think I had them quite low compared to you in my Western Conference standings, but that's basically just to do with Jamal Murray's injury. When Jamal Murray's fit with Jokic, with MPJ, with Aaron Gordon even, who they've obviously just re-signed as well, I think this is one of the best teams in the league and will be one of the best teams in the league. Final thing before we move on, I just wanted to... I wanted to go an episode without talking about COVID, but I couldn't do it. So I'm sorry. I have to talk about it a second, because that is probably the big thing. Yeah, that's probably the big thing in the NBA at the moment, isn't it? Is coronavirus, the COVID vaccine. Incidentally, I actually had my second vaccine this morning. Hurt a bit more than the first, but I'm going well. Hopefully I don't get too many heart palpitations during this episode. But I just want to chat about Kyrie, and it's all kind of interlocked between Kyrie and Andrew Wiggins. And this is actually, I don't want to talk about Kyrie himself. I actually want to talk about someone who tweeted about Kyrie, and that's D'Angelo Russell. And all this kind of COVID and COVID vaccine stuff is all interlocked, really, because it's funny how D'Lo was traded for Andrew Wiggins and whatnot. Now, we know that D'Lo is really good friends with Kat, right? Then surely you know how much COVID has devastated Kat's family. And you come out and tweet, Kyrie is goated on Twitter, when Kyrie is probably the most notable player right now, along with Andrew Wiggins, who is an anti-vaxxer. Let's put it out there. Can we make sense of why D'Lo tweeted that? Like, I don't know.
I think these players are just coming off incredibly selfish and insensitive for particularly D'Angelo Russell. And the vaccine, yeah, it's for your own protection, but for the most of it, it's actually for other people. And for you to jeopardize the NBA potentially going ahead, for you to jeopardize the health of other people, I think that is the incredibly. And you've got D'Lo, who you sit across from him, probably would have counseled Karl Anthony Towns during that time, and then to come across like this, I think it's an incredibly selfish thing to do. And for what I've read some of their theories, like the microchips and stuff. And I bet you all these players, if their grandma or whatever was sick, they wouldn't question the doctors at all. The doctor, whatever you need, but for some reason they want to make some sort of stand. And some of the names coming up, Bradley Beal, I didn't expect to be an anti-vaxxer as well. Do
you know what I hate? Do you know what really grinds my gears? And I think Bradley Beal said it. He was the main one, and he was just like, "Oh, but you get this vaccine and you still get COVID." Well, yeah, but you don't die from it. That's probably a big thing, I would have thought, is the fact you don't die from it. Like, how difficult is it to understand that, yes, you can still get the coronavirus after you have the vaccine. The difference is you will not end up in ICU in a hospital, or it is very unlikely. If you go through the statistics of who is in hospital and in near-death situations right now from coronavirus, 95% or more is going to be unvaccinated people. So I just hate that argument so much. It is incredible. But anyway, how about we get on to the Central Division, and we'll be up next starting with the Chicago Bulls. Alrighty, the Chicago Bulls. I'm really looking forward to where you have this team in the Eastern Conference, because after their off-season, I think they're one of the most intriguing teams going around. They had some massive ins: DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, the GOAT, Tony Bradley, Stanley Johnson, Derek Jones Jr., Outsco, Al-Farouq Amino, Cristiano Felicio, Thomas Satoransky, Jarrett Temple, Daniel Tice, Denzel Valentine, and Thaddeus Young. Over underline for 42.5. My simple question to you is, what's the pass mark for this team?
When it first originally happened, I didn't think too much of it, but now that I've really done some research in terms of how much they've given up, I think top 4 seed. That's how harsh.
That's a pass mark. Is a top 4 seed.
The amount of financial investment they've put into this team, I think you need to. they've gone really, because you and I have applauded these teams that go really big, and they've gone really, really heavy on guards, and all of it's kind of predicated on that, hoping that Zach LaVine doesn't stay. And I reckon Zach LaVine, if they put forth another mediocre season, I mean, they've gave up for the Nikolai, they gave up 2 kind of top 10 picks, and DeMar DeRozan, there was another pick in there as well. And I think they've got every reason to. I mean, Zach LaVine's an all-star, Nikolai's an all-star, and DeRozan's been an all-star, multiple-time all-star, I should say. And as you know how big I am on Lonzo Ball. So for the amount of talent, mate, I think this team needs to be top 4. Because what you were just alluding to, the fact that the Bucks, and God knows what's going to happen with Philly, God knows what's going to happen with the Nets and Kyrie Irving, I think the top 4 is almost wide open. You can actually go for it in there. So, and I reckon with the East away structure, the talent you've got on paper, top 4, you're shaking your head. You think I'm
shaking my head. That's a piss take. Top 4.
Yeah.
How about we just make the playoffs first and just worry about that? I mean, I don't top 4. See, my pass mark is playoffs. Okay, you haven't been in the playoffs. You have to make playoffs with this team, with this roster you've contracted. Now, there's a lot of people out there that don't think they'll make playoffs. But the pass mark for me is playoffs, and I think they will, for what it's worth, make the playoffs. Top 4 seed, that basically you're saying they need to be better than, okay, let's say I think your Miami Heat are better. I think Brooklyn are better. I think Milwaukee are obviously better. Milwaukee and Brooklyn are in a league of their own, but I think the Heat are better. The Hawks are probably better. The Celtics are probably better. I think 76ers, even without Simmons, if Embiid just stays healthy for 70 of the 80 games, I think they're better. Top 4, I just don't see that as realistic. I like their off-season, I like their moves, but I don't think it's doing anything to be a top 4 seed or anything close to a championship contender.
I reckon they're pretty deep. Like the Derek Joneses of the world, they're not the household names or anything, but I think in terms of talent, they need to be. And the uncertainty of the East, I think they're probably one more sure teams, I guess, if you want to put it that way, on there. But yeah, mate, I've really looked into the financial investment they've made for this, and I think even like the DeRozan, because I guess DeRozan must have been looking elsewhere, but they gave up a first round pick to swap him. Go from the Spurs, so I reckon they're almost swinging for a home run now, and the goal is to try and keep Zach LaVine as happy as possible. If it was because now that I've seen just how far off we are, I'm really curious to see where you've got them. So do you playoffs in terms of how far they can go? How far do you have them going then? If you have them making playoffs,
first round.
Let's work.
I don't think, again, because to get into the second round, you've got to be a top 4 team. And I just don't think that's realistic. The kind of players on paper are all right. Zach LaVine's a nice player. I don't think he's the best player on a championship team. And I think he can be the best player on a team that makes the playoffs as long as the roster's good around him. And I think the roster's good enough around him now for them to make the playoffs. I don't think he's the best player on a top 4 seed team like you're saying. And he's still the best player on this team. You've brought in DeRozan, you've brought in Lonzo, you've still got Nikola Vucevic there, who you brought in at the trade deadline. Not 4 nice players, really good, above average. Zach's an all-star. I like what I saw in the Olympics from him. I thought he was one of Team USA's better perimeter defenders. I thought he made quite a jump in the Olympics and showed that he could be a capable perimeter defender. I think he needs to learn, and he did this in the Olympics a little bit more than what we've seen for Chicago. I think, especially with Lonzo and DeMar DeRozan coming in, I think he needs to learn to be a better off-ball player going forward, and I think he can do that. There's no reason why there's possessions where Zach can just go and sit in a corner and then just shoot, be a spot-up shooter for possessions here and there. He's going to get enough opportunities for him to do his ISO stuff, to take guys off the dribble. We understand he can do that. But with these new guys coming in, he's got to try and be a good off-ball player as well, whether it be sitting in a corner, waiting for the open shot, or whether it's cutting to the rim kind of thing. We know how athletic he is. So that's the big thing for me. But I don't think he can ever get to a point where he's the best player on a championship team or the best player on a top 4 seeded team. I just don't think that's him. I mean, he probably might have the talent to do it, maybe, but I just don't see it. He's been in the league long enough now that I know who he is. And just this fit, I mean, what's going to happen defensively with this team? With Lonzo, good defender. Zach LaVine, thought he was okay defensively in the Olympics, but has been a poor defender throughout his years in the league so far. DeRozan is probably one of the worst defenders in the league. Vucevic for a centre is probably one of the worst defenders in the league. And Patrick Williams is probably going to come in there, which he's going to be a really good defender in this league, but ultimately it's his second season coming up. So defensively, huge question marks.
That was probably, if I was to pick one concern as to why they're going to slip, is the fact that they don't really have a lockdown defense. Like, I'm big on Lonzo Ball, but I think his defense at this stage is more like deflections and blocks. In terms of just like a one-on-one stopper, he's not probably at that stage just yet. As you said, Zach LaVine, I don't even know if he's been an average defender. I haven't seen anything defensive from him. DeRozan doesn't defend. And Patrick Williams, it's not the issue of the fact that he's the second player, but he will be the only person they can put on the LeBrons, like the best player on each team down the stretch. They can't trust DeRozan to do it. Lonzo probably can't do it. So that would probably be my one concern. Where did you have them finishing then? Actually,
I've got them 7th. I think the roster's good enough. And the more I think about it, the more I see the names on paper, I think it's a good team, but nothing really more than that. So I think they'll return to the playoffs for the first time in a while, but they're over underline 42.5, maybe just overs. Again, I'm probably not too high on betting on it, but I might have them just overs. Why? Where do you have them? Are you saying they're a top 4 team, eh?
No, I'm not saying it. I'm still got them making playoffs. I've got them 8th in mine.
Okay, so after all that, and you saying a pass mark is top 4, I have them higher than you.
The uncertainty of this East, and I don't see why they can't be a top 4 team with the uncertainty of the East at the moment. Just this week alone is why I think they should be. But that'll be fun to watch, I reckon. And I'm just glad Lonzo Ball's going to get a new system and a new city to be in. I think it's going to be Lonzo Ball might be even sneaky, most improved.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, 7th for me for the Chicago Bulls, 8th for you. At least they're back to playoff action, according to us. But next up, we'll get on to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we'll be joined by a good mate of ours in Henry Johnstone. All right, we're on to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we welcome a good mate of ours, Henry Johnstone. How are you on this Thursday night, mate?
I'm very well, lads. I thought about going into the bathroom to record like Pock used to. But,
Shots fired already. Well, jeez. The old bathroom, I'm not there anymore, thankfully. Anyway, I realised I just said Thursday night. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's actually Wednesday night. I have no idea why. I wish it was Thursday. But anyway, let's get into the Cavs. Notable ins and outs. Lauri Markkanen was a big one. Talking of big ones, Taco Fall, big 7'6" man. Evan Mobley, another big there. Ricky Rubio, Denzel Valentine. They re-signed Jarrett Allen. Outs go Matthew Dellavedova, Larry Nance Jr. in that trade, Taurean Prince. And I will just say here that Lee does the ins and outs. He sends through the ins and outs to me. And the most notable ones, and for some reason he had as a notable out here, Anderson Varejao.
Cavaliers legend.
Cavs legend, Anderson Varejao. Yeah. So he was a notable out. The over-under line for this team is 27.5. First thing I wanted to ask you, Hennerz, was how do you see this roster construction, and in particular the front court? Because obviously you re-sign Jarrett Allen to a massive contract. You draft Evan Mobley. Then you bring in Lauri Markkanen. You've still got Kevin Love there. That's 4 guys who could perceivably start. Now, I don't think Kevin Love's going to start anymore, but even like those 3 guys, Mobley, Allen, and Markkanen, and when you guys signed Markkanen, I was a bit confused, more so from his point of view, about the fact that he's basically been a starter in the league for the majority of his first 4 years at the Bulls, and now I think clearly the front court should be Mobley and Jarrett Allen starting. Like, what do you make of this roster construction, and in particular that front court?
Yeah, look, the Markkanen signing was a bit strange. Didn't really make sense considering we drafted Mobley, but his contract's not too bad. It's only 2 years, 3rd year non-guaranteed. So if he's not great, we can just dish him. But I probably have Markkanen starting over Mobley, to be honest.
Yeah.
Really?
Get Mobley coming off the bench, I reckon.
Yeah.
Just get his sea legs in the NBA underneath him. But those 3, I guess, and you'll put Mobley in towards the end of the season, depending on how Markkanen goes.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think a lot of fans, and well, just NBA fans in general, rather than just specifically Cavs fans, would assume that Mobley being the third pick in the draft would basically be a guarantee to start. So that's interesting that you say from a Cavs point of view, from a Cavs fan point of view, that he might actually come off the bench. So I think that sounds a bit strange. I'd be surprised, but potentially, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Markkanen has been a starter, and he's showing glimpses. I just think he could be potentially a very good player. It just depends on how he goes. But if that doesn't pan out, you just put Mobley back onto the field and pair him with Allen, which should work well because Allen's a good pick and roll, and Mobley spaces the floor well.
I'd definitely have Lauri Markkanen as a starting power forward, based on the fact, obviously, he's been in the league for well enough. You need floor spacing. Your guards love to get to the rim. And thirdly, because Mobley, for all, like, he's got an incredible base, like, skill set, but he's still a couple of years away maybe from realising his full potential. So I think it's a great way to start, letting him get established into it. But the backcourt has been a big discussion. Garland Sexton, very similar guards. Very, very impressive leaps they've been making lately. Do you believe they can coexist? Do you think that is your backcourt of the future?
Yes and no, I think. Well, I like them offensively because I think Garland's a really good distributor, and they're both pretty good 3-point shooters. Like, I think it was 39 and 37 for Garland and Sexton. It's just more defensively, because they're both 6'1", they're both small. Yeah. All the guards in the East, Kyrie and Harden, CJ. Oh, no, they're not in the East.
We know what you're talking about, yeah.
Bogdan and Trey, I had them all listed before. And just the playmaking, because Sexton's not the most willing passer at the moment. But I think defensively, for sure, is the biggest issue.
Yeah. That was my biggest thing. I don't think they can coexist, because I don't think the two offensively minded, undersized guard like combination works in the NBA. Because I look at Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum are probably the upper echelon of that. And how long have they been trying to make that work? 4 years, and they just get hit. Yeah, at the end of the season, postseason, they're just too small and don't play both sides of the ball. I even think, specifically talking about the Cavs, I'm when Kyrie Irving and Dion Waiters were the backcourt of the Cavs years ago, and that. It was fun to watch, but gee, they get hammered on there. So, and I think Sexton is an incredible trade piece. You haven't paid him the crazy money yet, and I think he could eventually become a starting point guard in the NBA. So, I think if you find a more defensive guy to go in there, put this.
Can we just get into the financial aspect then? Because I think that's, along with the defensive issues that tandem brings, I think the financial aspect is probably the biggest aspect of all this, in terms of he's going to be eligible for an extension at the end of this season, or he's going to go into free agency at the end of this season. What do we think that Colin Sexton is worth? Because we've just seen Michael Porter Jr. get 5 years, 207. Now, he's not going to get a max contract. But what will he get on the open market, and what, as a Cavs fan, Hennerz, would you be happy to give him in terms of, a salary over 4 or 5 years?
That's a great question. Well, he's obviously not Michael Porter Jr. He's a very good player. What's the max you get, similar to what, like, a DeAndre? I mean, Aaron Fox got like 160, 200. Yeah, that's the max you get. I don't think he's worth that. He's definitely an echelon below those guys.
You know what I'd say? Just to put it out there. I'm thinking Lonzo. See what Lonzo just got from the Bulls, which was just around that $20 million mark. That's probably what I would pay Colin Sexton. I think if he's a different player to Lonzo, obviously, but if we're talking about point guards around that echelon, I would think $20 million range, around Lonzo's range. He clearly doesn't have the defense of Lonzo. He probably doesn't even have the playmaking of Lonzo, but he's a better flat-out scorer than Lonzo is. So I think a team would pay him around that, maybe 4 years, 80 to 90 kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty good comparison.
Would you pay him that, though, as a Cavs fan?
Probably. Yeah, I probably would, but then we've got a lot of weird sized contracts, like Jared Allen's on 20 mil, then you have to pay Garland, because I think Garland's the future with Mobley.
Yeah.
Or the other option is you trade him before the trade deadline come February, March kind of thing, and you get something for him. I was actually surprised that he's still on the roster now. I thought you guys might have moved him in the off-season just because of the fact that if a team acquires him by February, March, for example, then they're going to have to do that knowing that they're going to have to pay him in free agency, or he could kind of leave in free agency and then you only get him for a few months kind of thing. So I think his value by the trade deadline would have actually diminished compared to what it would have been during the off-season. So do you expect him to still be there by the end of the season kind of thing?
I probably do, I reckon, knowing it's Cleveland. It's hard to get any big free agents. Like, we're not a major market team, and it's Cleveland. So, but if you do trade him, I don't mind it, because you could probably slide a Okoro down to the 2, and then we need a wing. We don't really have. We're lacking small forwards. Like, it's Shetty Osman and
and not much. That's why, like, that's why.
Could you try marketing Mobley and Allen?
Okay, so they could throw that lineup out there, and why not? You're the Cavs, you're rebuilding, you're developing. I don't hate that idea. I did hear a podcast before Mobley was drafted, and it said, I can't remember who it was, but they were discussing the idea of Evan Mobley being a small forward in the league.
Oh my God.
And I can guarantee you this season, you will see a lineup out there of Evan Mobley, Lauri Markkanen, and Jared Allen. Or maybe one of those guys gets substituted out for Kevin Love. I don't like that because Kevin Love.
I reckon they'll definitely play it.
Yeah, that's going to be super fascinating. I'm going to enjoy watching that.
That's going to be extraordinary just to see. Hennerz, I've got you finishing 13th though in the East. Your line is 27.5. I've got you under that as well. Am I being harsh? 20. I think 13 and under 27.
I reckon you are being a bit harsh.
Ooh.
To be honest.
Wow.
You'd expect him to say that, given he's a Cavs fan.
I haven't done my own standings, but who have you got below me? Or is that a surprise still?
I've got Detroit Pistons under you, and then Orlando Magic coming dead last. So
yeah, that's fair.
And then
I had the exact same for what it's worth.
Yeah. I don't know. Garland and Sexton could turn it on with Allen. You never know.
You never know. Well,
you're both going the under, 27.5.
Yeah.
No, I might take the overs.
Wow.
I wouldn't bet on it, but I might take the overs. Just because I think they won 22 games last year in a 72-game season. So you get an extra 10 games, and I think they'll be a bit better. I think Mobley coming in can contribute right away. Markkanen can come in and contribute right away. I don't see any of those guys that went out as having, a major detrimental impact to your team kind of thing. Maybe Larry Nance Jr., possibly.
Maybe Delhi.
Yeah, I think the Larry Nance.
Maybe Anderson Varejao.
Well, I think the Larry Nance is a big problem because he was actually quite a good playmaker for us, isn't it? So Garland will have more of a role. But I'd probably stay away from the line just with the K Love thing. You never know.
Yeah, okay. So before we finish, let's chat the Kevin Love thing.
Oh boy.
What do you want to happen here? Because it just seems like he's wanted out for ages. That contract's unmovable, though. Like, what do you want to happen with that?
Ideal world, he goes back to being 2013 K Love and he dominates.
30 All-Star.
That's not going to happen.
Let's have realistic scenarios, please.
We trade him for something. Don't have to give away a pick or just buy him out. I just don't want him wasting money sitting on the bench.
Yeah. So would you expect him
just prefer to get rid of him.
If you look at the teams around the league, I think Kevin Love can still be okay for championship contending teams. Like, as a Warriors fan, I wouldn't mind him if he's kind of your backup small ball 5 kind of thing. I wouldn't mind that. So if you can't find a trade for him by the trade deadline, which I think is very likely, I just don't see a team trading for him on $30 million. Would you expect the franchise to buy him out and allow him to go and sign elsewhere?
Maybe, but they're not going to buy him out for the full money, are they?
Okay.
And he probably, I don't blame him. He probably wants all 30 mil per year.
60 mil.
A lot of money.
Well, he's got 2 years left, doesn't he? So he's got 60 mil.
60 mil left. So I don't know. I agree with you though. He could be a good starter on or bench player on a playoff team like Blake Griffin was last year.
Yeah, it's probably a similar situation.
I probably would pay him out and just get rid of him and start over again.
Yeah.
At Mobley.
I think it's a great time to be a Cavs. This is the first time I've been optimistic about the Cavs, and LeBron hasn't been on the roster. So, mate, I reckon it's a great time to be a Cavs fan, and it'll be fun to watch. But still got your 13.
It will be fun to watch. It could go either way. Could be a disaster. Could be great.
That's how that sums up.
What's
the Cavs.
great though, like 11th.
Just a young core.
We could make the play-in.
Oh, well, yeah,
That's the great
10th,
thing about the play-in.
maybe
I
generous.
could see us finishing 10th.
Okay, all right.
You never know if the cards fall right.
Okay, all right. We'll wait and see. But other than that, we'll finish up on the Cleveland Cavaliers. We do feel a bit sorry for you. You obviously had that championship 5 or 6 years ago now. Other than that, hasn't been a great storyline for the Cavs over their history. But thanks for coming on and discussing it otherwise.
No worries, lads. Thanks for having me.
Up next, the Detroit Pistons, who have had a saving grace in Cade Cunningham coming in with the number 1 pick, finally getting it. It probably is the biggest in. Trey Lyles has come in. Kelly Olynyk, who a player I've just never really liked for some reason. They've re-signed Frank Jackson, Corey Joseph, Rodney McGruder, and out goes Wayne Ellington, Jahlil Okafor, Mason Plumlee, and Dennis Smith Jr. This is a pretty blunt question, I guess, and I asked about Houston, but how far away are Detroit? I guess they've got the Cade Cunningham, the number 1 pick. They've got Killian Hayes, who's also a top 10 pick. They've got Jeremy Grant, who's the guy that backed himself well. He's become this. So, in your estimation, how far away are Detroit?
Probably 2 to 3 years, I guess. It's probably going to be on the back end of Cade's first contract, which is obviously 4 years. So I'd be hoping by his third, maybe more likely his 4th year, that this could be a team that returns to playoff action. I don't really see it at the moment. I think Cade can be a good player to begin with in his first season. I don't think he's going to be a huge game changer necessarily in terms of winning games of basketball. Jeremy Grant, put up numbers last year. How much did he contribute to winning games of basketball? Well, they weren't a great team. So, I mean, giving him that contract looks good with the numbers he's putting up, but we'll just wait and see how much he can contribute to winning moving forward. Killian Hayes obviously had a really disappointing and injury-riddled rookie season. Can he coexist? Can he, come back and coexist with Cade in that backcourt? Because on paper, that looks like a really exciting backcourt for the future. Killian Hayes becomes the player that many predicted he could be when he was taken, 7th overall, I think, last year. If he can become that player and Cade is what a number 1 pick should be, that's a great backcourt for the future. Especially, you got Cade there at 6'8" as one of your 2 starting guards. Like that's where Cade Cunningham, you look at the ball handling, the shooting ability at 6'8" as a backcourt player, like absolutely incredible. And I think he's, obviously at 6'8" with that wingspan as well. He's got potential on the defensive end that we probably won't see too much early on, but I think moving forward in his career, he can really show off and develop. So, yeah, exciting backcourt. You've got Jeremy Grant there, and then you just work your pieces around it, I guess, at the end of the day. But how much faith do you have in Cade Cunningham being able to single-handedly turn this franchise around? Because there's no one else on that roster that I look at and think, oh, yeah, he's going to be a massive game changer. He's going to lead that team back to anything close to playoff action. So how much faith do you have in Cade as the number 1 pick?
I've got a lot of faith in Cade Cunningham being number 1, in turning the franchise around as number 1 pick. And I see him having almost a LaMelo Ball effect on the teammates around him. Because I think why the Detroit Pistons have sucked so badly is the fact they have such a lack of leadership. I mean, Killian Hayes, he was coming from overseas. They didn't really know him that well, and they didn't really have that. And I just felt, looking at LaMelo Ball's season, the Miles Bridges and stuff, actually loved playing with him. And I think Cade Cunningham, looking at him, he went to a pretty small college, and he was able to drag them pretty far. As you said, 6'8" ball handler that do it all is the future of the NBA. And what is blowing my mind is how good defensively he was. He's only a few summer league games, but he was an active defender, and I think they're gonna, if they see a young guy leading them that way, and a lot of my faith is actually in Dwayne Casey as their coach, because he was at Toronto for a long time, and he was there with Fred VanVleet was playing well. was there when Siakam was really coming along. So I think, yeah, I'll probably do have the same time frame as you. Still a few years away, but on paper, yeah, 6 tall ball handlers who can shoot from around there as your backcourt. Jeremy Grant, as you mentioned, and I think, yeah, he's got a lot of. I think he is that guy that can do such a thing, and you can tell he actually wants to be that guy. Allude to, at least I'll bring up mental toughness everywhere, but I love the way he's coming across on my screen, Cade Cunningham, his attitude and the way he plays, and yeah, I've got a lot of faith. Do you share my sentiment? Do you share my faith?
Yeah, no, I think so. Look, they're going to have another losing season where they're not good. I've got them 14th. Look, there's no harm in that, and I think pairing him with another top 5 pick is probably what you need to do to step up and become a better franchise moving forward. So if you can get another top 5 pick in the draft next season to pair with Cade Cunningham, Jeremy Grant's a strange player for mine because he's still like youngish, but there was talk of him at the trade deadline last season potentially being moved on to a playoff contender or something. I don't know if he's like a long-term piece for the Detroit Pistons. I think he can be, but whether they're happy for him to kind of, put up his numbers and wait around for this team to be good for a few seasons, I don't know. Or if they try and get value for him, if a team comes and says, we'll give you a top 10, top 15 pick kind of thing for a player like that. I don't know, but it's a franchise that now has some direction because last season we were talking about the fact they still had Blake, they still had Derrick Rose, I think, at the time. There was just some real question marks on where this team was going and what direction they were going in. Well, they moved on from Blake, they moved on from Derrick Rose, and yes, they sucked last season, but the reward was getting Cade Cunningham, and I don't think there's any harm in sucking again to get another top 5 pick. Hopefully, if the lottery falls their way, who knows, could be another number 1 pick, and you could have back-to-back number 1 picks, which would be absolutely extraordinary. Did you have them anywhere higher than that at all?
I'm exactly 14th as well, but yeah, just everything you just said, mate. That because those years when they had like Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin on the court at the same time, and Derrick Rose, who can't space the floor, he's just a deplorable game style they played. They weren't pretty to watch. So a year of letting Cade Cunningham be that leader is the thing. Their line's 23.5. That would be in. What do you know that one? No bet. Not touching that one.
What would you say if you had to gun to your head?
No bet. These bottom-ranked teams, I just never know. Randomly, you could just they make a play in for some random reason, or go back to or get the number 1 pick again. So no, I don't like these bottom-ranked teams. Yeah,
it is fair. I don't really want to have any bets on teams that have an over/under line in the 20s kind of thing because it's so low when you just think we're returning to an 82-game season. It's like, can the Pistons go 24-58? Like, probably not, but it's still just such a low line. But anyway, next up, we'll get into the Indiana Pacers.
We just set off air. Don't know how long we spent on the Indiana Pacers. Don't know how often I think about them, to be honest. Their ins was Torrey Craig and a lot of random rookies, like undrafted, like mature age rookies I didn't really think about. They re-signed TJ McConnell, which was good. Out goes Aaron Holiday, Doug McDermott, Cassius Stanley. Obviously, they're young. They actually bottom end of the playoffs. I'm just wondering, from what you see at the Pacers, how much more can they improve, just from what you see?
Well, there's one guy there. Well, sorry. No, I'll say it's... The big piece is probably Karis LeVert, who's got another injury, unfortunately, that he's recovering from, I think. Look, this is a weirdly constructed team, because if they're fully healthy, they've got a starting 5 of good NBA players who are... They're not young and developing as such. They're kind of who they are. You could have a starting lineup of Malcolm Brogdon, Karis LeVert, TJ Warren, Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner. That's 5 good NBA players. But none of them are superstars. Sabonis is an all-star, I guess. He's their best player.
Lower end of
an all-star. But, yeah, it's a strangely constructed team. And my thought is, there were reports during the off-season that they were willing to give up Brogdon and some other pieces to bring in Ben Simmons, potentially, from Philly. which is a move I was surprised that Philly didn't kind of give more credence to, given I like Malcolm Brogdon as a player. Now, he's not Ben Simmons. He doesn't have the upside of Ben Simmons, but I think he's a good player. I remember, if we go back to Inside Feed NBA podcast last season, there was a time last season where you will laugh at this. I had Malcolm Brogdon as an all-star starter in the Eastern Conference last year.
No.
That's how good his first 20 or 30 games were. Within a couple of weeks of that call, it started looking very disgusting. It looked sick, and he was never even close to being an all-star in the end, let alone being an all-star starter. But, yeah, it's probably up to Karis LeVert. If Karis LeVert... Stop... he's pissing himself at me.
I forgot about that.
An all-star starter, Malcolm Brogdon. Who knows? Might come out this year. Pacers might be a top 5 seed, and Malcolm Brogdon's an all-star starter in the Eastern Conference. Who knows? Probably not going to happen with James Harden there and Kyrie, obviously, depending on what he does and all these other Trae Young and whatnot. Yeah, Malcolm Brogdon's probably a little bit down the list, but who knows what happens with injuries and stuff like that. Anyway, it's probably up to Karis LeVert, who we didn't really see much, if at all, for the Pacers last season, obviously coming over in that trade from the Nets. So if he can come in and be a close to all-star caliber player, then, I don't know, this team to me has some, not upside, but it has some potential to make the playoffs just because they're pretty deep. You've got the 5 of us, as I spoke about. You've got Jeremy Lamb. You've got TJ McConnell, as you said, who they re-signed. You've got Doug McDermott. Doug McDermott left, I should say. Got that one wrong. But, what I think my point still remains that they are a fairly deep team. So if they can stay healthy and there's teams around them that have injury issues, then I think they're certainly more than capable of making the playoffs. But they're a team, as I say and bring up most episodes, that they are in this middling period. They'll be somewhere between 6 and 11. They're not really getting high picks. They bring in Chris Duarte, who is a 24-year-old who can play straight away, so that strengthens my argument about how deep they are. But again, I think he's going to be a good NBA player. I don't think he's going to be anywhere near a star or anything like that. So, yeah, they're going to be between 6 and 11. They're not going to get out of the first round if they do make the playoffs, but they're not going to get a top 5 to 10 pick either. So, I don't know where this franchise is heading.
I probably don't have any arguments against what you've just said, but I just want to see a year of health because they get really dogged with health. Because TJ Warren looked like Tracy McGrady in the bubble, and then he was out for he was out for a lot of the season. And even Miles Turner, I remember the start of his season, he looked like the defensive player of the year, and then he gets such ticky-tacky injuries in there. So I definitely want to see them healthy in a way. And as you said, on paper, Brogdon is maybe not going to be an all-star starter, so rookie of the year, and he's a do-it-all point guard, and he's actually a solid, strong point guard. And then Karis LeVert, who 20 points per game, TJ Warren can score 20 a game, and then obviously Sabonis is an all-star, and Miles Turner. So on paper, I like to see a season of them being healthy, and probably. But then at the same time, that middling area, because if they are healthy, they're still in the same area. Because when they come up against the Brooklyn Nets, the Bucks, they don't have
the star power.
That guy that's got the Sabonis. He's an all-star, he's skilled, but they don't have that guy. So I reckon it could be, this season. It could tell a lot. I reckon with what they want to do with that franchise.
So where do you have them then? Between that 6 and 11 mark, obviously, where are they at?
I have the 7th, so still making playoffs. But probably first round again, just based on just top end talent. They don't have that. First round they probably come up against the Bucks or the Nets. And it's gonna be ugly.
I've got them 10th, which
wow,
low because I'm worried about the health. TJ Warren's still a question mark. I think Karis LeVert is still a question mark. Yeah, Brogdon always seems to pick up an injury here or there. So for me. Yeah, still question marks on the health, and that's why I have them 10th. I probably agree with you. If they're fully healthy, they're at least 7th, if not higher. Just because I think, before I blow it up, I want to see what that starting 5 looks like, because that starting 5, I know I just said I had them 10th, but literally every one of those players could score you 20 points a night. You're talking about Malcolm Brogdon. You're talking about Karis LeVert. You're talking about TJ Warren. You're talking about Sabonis. Miles Turner, maybe not. He'll give you, 12 to 15 kind of thing. But At least four of those blokes,
like 3 blocks.
at least four of those blokes have potential of averaging over 8, even if we say 18 points a game. Then, so they've got some offensive firepower. They don't really have a weakness offensively. Turner can shoot the 3 ball. Sabonis can shoot the 3 ball. So they can space the floor all over the court there. So they don't really have any downsides offensively. Look, defensively, there's still real question marks with that Turner and Sabonis combination. It seems like Miles Turner has been in trade discussions for the last 1,000 years, but he's still on the Indiana Pacers. I don't know if anyone's ever going to give up enough value for them to move on from him and that combination with Domantas Sabonis. But yeah, I agree that they probably need to get a season of full health before they blow it up.
Yeah, but that meddling middle ground that they're in, they're not really getting a high pick, not really contending with the teams, could be a strong something to think about.
Yeah, it's not where you want to be really as a franchise. You either want to be in rebuilding mode where you're getting those top picks and then you eventually move into playoff action and then hopefully eventually into championship contention, or obviously you're up in championship contention already. But other than that, quickly, the line 42.5, you would have had overs then, I think, if you haven't seen it.
Over, yeah, if I'm
Yeah, I have them, I don't know. I feel like this conversation's convinced me more that they're better than 10th. And I concede they're better than 10th they're better than 10th if they're fully healthy. I completely concede that. I just have question marks over it. It's, again, given that health, it's a no bet at 42.5 for me. But other than that, next up we got Farlat, the big horse. He's joining us to discuss the Milwaukee Bucks, his NBA champions. All right, last on our Central Division here, we welcome the big horse to discuss his NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks. How are we on this Wednesday night?
I'm very well, thanks, boys. Thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan of the pod, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Very happy to have you on, mate. I reckon you might be the only Bucks fan I know. I need to know first, how did your love affair come with the Bucks in the first place? First jersey you got, always just been a fan? What happened?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wasn't always a huge NBA fan growing up. Probably wasn't until 4 or 5 years ago I picked up the game and put a bit of interest into it. I suppose I don't want to come across as a bandwagon, but I suppose it probably aligns pretty well when the Bucks had those nice 56, 60 win seasons in sort of 2018-19, and Giannis was just starting to take over. So I think it probably aligns with that. And being a country boy myself, I enjoy that sort of small market Milwaukee sort of vibe. So that probably explains it a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's all right, mate. I'm a bit of a bandwagoner myself, so I'm not going to have any shirt for anyone who wants to get on any team's bandwagon, I guess. Notable ins and outs for the Milwaukee Bucks over the off-seasons. In comes Grayson Allen, Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye. They re-signed Thanasis Antetokounmpo. I still think he's only on the team because of his brother sometimes. But anyway, they also re-signed Bobby Portis. Out goes Bryn Forbes, back to the Spurs, Justin Jackson, Jeff Teague, and PJ Tucker. Interested to know your thoughts on whether you think that is a bit of a loss or not. My question to you is, obviously coming off an NBA championship, where does the improvement come from for this team? Because I'm still of the belief that a fully healthy Brooklyn Nets takes you guys out in the second round of the playoffs last season. If they're back fully healthy, who knows what's happening with Kyrie and all his anti-vax stuff, and if he's going to be around much even at playoff time. But where does the improvement come from for you guys to remain on top, I guess, and still above the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, I suppose just looking at how the roster has taken shape post winning the championship, and I'm pretty happy with sort of the ins and outs at this stage. You touched on PJ Tucker there, and certainly throughout the playoff series, I think my opinion of him sort of waned a little bit. I think early on he was a guy who could sit in the corner and hit threes and defended at a pretty good level, but people would give him a lot of credit in the Brooklyn series for how he was defending KD, and he was dropping 45 most games. So I think that was a bit out of line. And then he just proceeded to consistently give away silly fouls. I think if he got over 2 or 3 points in a game, it was a good result for him. So he was effectively a zero on offense. So I'm more than happy to see him go to the Miami Heat. And same goes really for Forbes. And I think Jeff Teague is probably another one guys who are on the roster and getting a few minutes throughout the playoffs, but I didn't really value their input all that much. Forbes, I think, by the end of the playoffs, was barely getting a look in. So, and pretty happy with the ins. We picked up Grayson Allen, who I think he's going to be a pretty good player for us. In terms of a guy who he's struggled on a pretty deep Memphis team, I think he's going to get a decent look on our roster, and he defends at a pretty high level and can shoot the three pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with him as a pickup, and as well as someone him alongside those other new guys who didn't win the championship last year. They're going to sort of drive that early season, regular season wins, hopefully. Yeah. And probably Rodney Hood's the other one who I think people sort of underestimate how young Rodney Hood is. I feel like he's been in the league a long time and he's a bit of a veteran, but he's only 28 years of age, coming off a pretty bad Achilles injury in 2019, but I think he's got a fair bit to give, has experience in playoffs both with Portland and Cleveland, so and shoots the three at a pretty high clip. So I'm pretty happy with how the roster's sitting. So I think that's where a bit of improvement will come, as well as Giannis is sort of at that interesting stage of his career now where he has a shot at really going for quite an incredible legacy. So I think, although he's coming off, he's got these 2 MVPs, he's got a Finals MVP, he's got a championship. I don't think there's going to be any risk of him slowing down. So I imagine he's going to play at a pretty high level, be in that MVP conversation, and lead us towards that not hopefully back-to-back championship.
Yeah.
Giannis was the big thing for the Bucks. He looked like a completely different player. So do you credit him for your dramatic turnaround, him becoming a better player, or is there something else that you credit the entire Bucks franchise as to why you're now the NBA champions?
Yeah, by the end of the playoffs, it's interesting. He was always, well, not always, but in 2018, 19, those MVP years, he was a really good player, obviously best player in the league, but come playoff time, I think we sort of lacked a bit of a leader on the court and someone who, would stand up, from a leadership perspective in those big games. I felt like that was where that big improvement came from his game. He's always going to give you, 30 and 15. You don't have to worry too much about that. But the way he was able to carry that team alongside, I think, that the veteran leadership of Drew Holiday, those guys together, really was where that big improvement came from. Drew in particular.
Yeah.
Well, I reckon, him just taking on the challenge, because I felt in other years when that war would happen, Giannis was kind of shrinking the playoffs. He wouldn't really want to take on the challenge, guarding the other team's best player. But I think, just his mentality, you could see he just became like mentally tough from all those playoff, losses. And Pock, what would you credit if you had to pick something that the Bucks franchise turned around, why they turned around?
Well, I think at the end of the day, basketball comes down to your best players. And I think Giannis, we went into the playoffs last season really hesitant about his performances in past playoffs and whether he could overcome that. And there was a massive bump there and he overcame it, and showed, in, that Brooklyn series and then again in the finals where, looking back at it now, it's quite incredible the fact that he had that massive injury. Well, not massive injury. It looked like it could have been a massive injury. And then he was able to come back and play like he did. It was almost a superhuman effort, to be honest. So that's where I think the improvement, it comes down to your best players. I thought Chris Middleton was a little bit more consistent than what he had been in past playoff series and had some big games where he really led that team. So, that was probably where the improvement comes from. It comes down to your best players at the end of the day. I just want to go back to that PJ Tucker out, obviously, over the off-season. Is it a simple thing for you, Will, in terms of PJ Tucker out, Dante DiVincenzo, who was out in the finals and the majority of the playoffs, or in fact, it might have been all the playoffs last season? I think he's a really good player. Is it as simple as PJ Tucker out, Dante DiVincenzo in?
I think they certainly cancel out. Obviously, they're different players and play a different role in the team. But again, I think PJ was he was getting by as, we don't need him as an offensive threat, which I partly don't mind that as a theory, because I think the Bucks averaged, it might have been the highest point per game in the history of the NBA. So I think it was up around 120. So we don't necessarily need a guy who can bring 10, 15 points a game, because our offense is already firing on all cylinders. But I think he's another year older now. He's already a pretty I was going to say elderly guy. It's probably a bit harsh to put it that way, but I feel like he's on the way out. He's not going to get better, I don't think, going into next year. So Dante coming back, I think him and alongside with Pat Connaughton, who I think he had a couple of big moments, especially in the finals, in terms of hitting big shots. And I reckon that could really grow him as a player and taking that confidence this year. I think he could maybe take a bit of a step, going from a guy who's been pretty serviceable until hopefully he can put a few more minutes into his rotation.
Yeah, I think bringing DiVincenzo in and then sliding Middleton down to the 3, I guess Giannis to the 4, or Giannis was probably at the 4, but I don't know, PJ, you had that front court, I guess, of PJ Tucker, Giannis, Brook Lopez kind of thing. That was a kind of a big front court. I think you'd be perfectly fine going with Drew and Dante in the backcourt, and then Middleton, Giannis, and Brook Lopez. Do you see anything differently? And I like the fact you've got, is that a plane going over?
It sounded a bit like it. I think it was just a truck, though.
Yeah, right. It sounded like there was a plane going very close to your house. Anyway, back on to discussion. Do you see anything differently? Because I also like the fact that you got Pat Connaughton and Bobby Portis as well. A couple of really good bench pieces still there, obviously.
Yeah, certainly. I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of Dante coming to shooting guard or free Chris up to play a bit more at the 3, and Giannis at the 4. In terms of guys who can help us out, George Hill I think is another acquisition who he'll basically just take all of Drew's bench minutes, which is a pretty handy guy, to be able to come off the bench and run the point, an experienced guy who's got playoff experience and can shoot the ball well, and from all accounts is a really good teammate. So he's another guy we've picked up who is going to add good depth to our roster, because that was something going into the playoffs I was a little bit concerned about. You looked at a team like the Phoenix Suns, for example, sort of 1 through 8 or 9, they had guys who could come on the court and play a role. With the Bucks, we're a little bit light on with Dante going out, but I suppose that was where big BP, Bobby Portis coming in and playing a really important role for us is probably a little bit unexpected. Same goes for, as I mentioned, Paddy Connaughton having some big moments. So I think that was important that we did add some depth because, as you mentioned off the bat, the Nets are certainly going to be the team to beat, and I'm very, very concerned about that because I look at them, and as much as I want to be a one-eyed Bucks supporter, I acknowledge that the Nets are incredibly talented, and they've gone in the off-season, and added some really handy pieces as well. So I think we're going to need that depth, to challenge them for sure.
Well, that was going to be, because I've got you guys finishing first again on top of the regular season. I think your line's 55.5 games, probably got you over that. But yeah, my last question was, around repeating. What's your confidence level? What do you see the reason why you wouldn't repeat or would repeat in that regard?
Yeah, you obviously probably think initially coming off a championship that you're going to be a little bit slow and will that hunger be there. But I think the reality is with these professional athletes, they're so driven and so motivated that, for mere mortals like ourselves, we might go into a season with that mentality. But these guys, especially guys like Giannis, I don't think they necessarily have that mentality. So 55.5, I'd probably go over, obviously. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, bringing in a few guys who weren't part of that roster, I think they didn't get to taste that championship success, and guys like Grayson Allen who still want to prove themselves. So I'll probably have us slightly over, and we might even end up probably having a better regular season record than the Nets. They're probably more in the we just need to be healthy sort of camp. But yeah, I still think we're going to have a pretty solid regular season and be up around that first or second seed.
Yeah, I had you guys second, but I might reconsider that now. I think given, I don't know what the fuck's happening with Kyrie, whether he's going to play at all or whether he's just going to play away games or what the hell, or if he's actually going to get vaccinated and play the majority of the season. I don't know. There's so many question marks going on there. I just think Brooklyn have a more talented roster. And you just mentioned there, obviously, that they're gearing up for playoff basketball. I actually expect the Bucks now with a championship under their belt to be more in that mold as well. In terms of, I think the past few seasons, it's all about, for the Bucks, how good we can be in the regular season and making sure we get that number 1 seed to have home court advantage in the playoffs. I don't see that with the championship now under the belt as being as important as what it has been in past seasons. So that's for me why I had them second. But as I said, Kyrie being an absolute unknown could change it for me. Yeah.
I think in past seasons, Coach Bud, because there's always been that cloud over him about is he a decent playoff coach and someone who can bring a championship. I think he's sort of tried to bank wins in the regular season to sort of hide the fact that he might not be performing that well in the postseason.
That's a very good point. That's a very cool point.
You can't pretty hard to sack a coach who's just had 60 wins. So that now he's got that championship under his belt, he might be happy to sort of take the foot off the gas a little bit and play Giannis a bit, and Chris and Drew, who's getting a little bit old as well. A few less minutes. But actually, I had one other point I wanted to bring up, and I think it's not to have a crack at Eric Bledsoe. Nothing against Eric, but I think it just goes to show how big a change. I mean, we're a decent team, but I think that was really carried more so by Giannis and Chris. And the second we get rid of Eric and bring in Drew, we're automatically competing for a championship. So I think, and Bledsoe went to Pelicans and he was he might be the fourth or fifth best team. So I think the fact that he was disguising himself in a pretty good team, gave people a bit of a false sense of security about how good he is. So I just thought bring that up as a bit of a point.
This is incredible. It's a roast about a player that's been off the team now for over a season, and we're just having some Eric Bledsoe slander. But I'm all for it, to be honest. It's quite incredible.
That's a great Bud point, because I've been very critical of Bud in terms of adjustments. I don't even think about it that way. Maybe he does that, but now that he's got his championship coach, I probably can't take that away from him now. But
I just can't get over. How about we finish it up on the Eric Bledsoe slander? I think we've all probably got the Bucks possibly going over 55.5 wins, even though, as I said, I think they might be more geared for being ready for the playoffs, as I said before. But other than that, Horse, thanks for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. You had plenty to say, and I love it.
Boys, thanks for having me on. Hopefully we'll be chatting later in the year and it'll lead up to another Bucks championship.
Look forward to it, mate.
Alrighty. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Boys.
Alright, just before we finish up here, just wanted to give a quick mention to our first NBA betting comp that we've got going on, doing a 5-leg on over-under win lines. We're going to chuck a $50 bonus bet on it. You and I have picked our selections, Lee. So I had the Suns over 50.5. You had, just double checking here, you had the Rockets under 27.5, which you like. Now I'll give you a quick update here. We've had 5 nominations, I guess you'd call them so far. Of course, the 3 with the most likes across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram will go into our multi. I did a little kind of made up a 5-leg multi on over underlines before I did this, and it works out to be about $20-21 around that range. So this bonus bet is probably going to return around $1,000, which 20% will go to each of the 3 contributors. So you do have the chance of winning $200 or so. Obviously, it will take the whole season, but I'm looking forward across these podcasts to getting into them and discussing this bet that we actually do place. But here are the top comments. They've all come from Facebook so far. So for those that may have got on Instagram or Twitter, maybe you want to comment it on Facebook or across different platforms. But so far we have actually Bingham over 27.5 on the Cleveland Cavaliers, who we've just discussed before. I think we like the unders, but he likes the overs. We have Alex Hogan-Jones on over 45.5 on the LA Clippers. Not sure how I feel about that, given Kawhi's out, but we'll wait and see on that. And we have my mate, Callum Berman, who I actually watched the grand final with last Saturday night. Good time. Thanks for the barbie and beers, mate. He's on Sacramento under 35.5 at $1.97. Says he feels like they have some nice elements, but they haven't gone to a level where they win any more than 31 games that they won last season. So, I mean, there is an extra 10 games for them to bump up that win total, but we'll wait and see. They're the 3 in front so far, but For anyone that hasn't commented yet, get around it. It's going to close at 7 p.m. on Friday night. So less than 48 hours now to get on that. Trying to give some cash money away, Lee.
I think it's very exciting, and the fact that men's mental health is something that you and I are both passionate about. So looking forward to be able to donate that way. So definitely get around it, and something we've been doing this entire season. So certainly keep engaged on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Yeah, definitely. So 5 nominations so far, 3 will go in. So get around that, get your mates to like your comments and whatnot to get in there and possibly win a couple $100. And we'll have a fair few betting competitions like this coming across the season, and a couple more to come during the preseason, which we're in now, on NBA season awards and things like that. But other than that, guys, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Star and Scrub NBA podcast. Apart from that, guys, make sure to follow us across all our social media channels, and we'll see you in the next episode.